Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah, welcome to another installment of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and I don't know about you guys, but, I think we could use a little more rain up here in the northern parts of the mitten. Okay, no, I'm not serious. I think we're good without rain here for quite a while. We got about 2 inches of rain up here in the mid-Michigan area, which is up north to those of you south of Lansing, right? There were a few tornadoes that hit in Montcalm County and Gratiot County this past Tuesday night, and I guess the officials are still going around checking out to see if there were some other possible touchdowns in the state. And I'd remind everyone, this is April. All right, this is April, everyone. April, not June, not July. This is April, and we're getting inundated with tornadoes in Michigan. Actually, there were, I think, reportedly around 14 tornadoes from Texas to Michigan in early April. And you know what I think? We need to make more idiotic moves like cutting back on clean energy technology and plugging in more fossil fuel pollution into the air. I think that would be great. That seems to be working out quite wonderfully, doesn't it? Hell, let's start, another idiotic war in the Middle East over oil. That's the ticket, everyone. That's where we are. That's where we are. And sadly enough, that's where millions of Americans wanted to go. Millions of Americans voted to have this kind of an America. I hope everyone is okay, and I'm from these storms, and I'm hoping those in Sheboygan County up north are all right too, as Governor Whitmer has declared an emergency as the dam levels up there are really high. So I wish the best for them. And I'm going to get back to being serious here. When you decide to gut clean energy policies and cut back on science and research, well, expect more of the same, as we will continue to lose money in damages and rebuilding after major storms. We'll continue to have to deal with rising insurance costs as well. Do we want to pay to prevent this, or do we want to pay to react to it? So far, all we're ever doing is reacting to it. It's about priorities, right? And speaking of priorities, last week I asked, where the hell MAGA Republican Congressman John James of Macomb County has been. John James, of course, is running for governor, but you wouldn't know it since he's hiding in his basement and is running these really pathetic ads where Dear Leader Trump says some glowing words about him. He's attaching himself to Trump. Only here's the problem is that Dear Leader hasn't endorsed him yet. It's just so pathetic. John James doesn't even show up to vote. He's got a job. He is a congressman in Michigan. He's got a job, and yet he refuses to work at that job as he's got the worst voting record among Michigan congressional people. The worst. And now John James can't even show up to put his name on a stupid resolution celebrating the University of Michigan's men's basketball team's national championship. He couldn't even do that. Democrat Debbie Dingell and MAGA Republican nutjob Lisa McClain got together and introduced a harmless resolution, which was co-signed by everybody in the Michigan congressional delegation celebrating U of M's basketball's national championship achievement. Even Louisiana Jack Bergman pretended to be a Michigander for at least a moment and put his name on the resolution. But John James couldn't even do that simple task. It's obvious to me John James is following in the footsteps of his dear leader and is simply hoping to slip into the job so he can do as little work as possible for Michigan while finding ways to enrich himself. Of course, we know that he will be nothing but a mouthpiece for the DeVos family, as the entire MAGA Republican Party establishment is. John James is a lightweight, and he should be very easy to beat, especially in this upcoming midterm election. If we only had some Democrats willing to get out there and make the case, the working class case, he would be so easy to defeat. I'm talking to you, Jocelyn Benson. leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. That's leftoflansing@gmail.com. As of this recording, it's tax day, and the direct file program, which allowed millions of working-class Americans to file their taxes to the IRS for free, is gone. It's vanished, of course, thanks to, you guessed it, the Trump regime and MAGA Republicans in Congress bowing down to H&R Block and Intuit, which gave them, or I should say, flooded them with bribe money. And due to their work, Americans collectively are now paying an extra $23 billion this year to file their taxes. But remember, Dear Leader really cares about affordability, and MAGA Republicans all care about the working class. As I talked about in last week's Friday Short, inflation continues to rise, and it's digging into the savings of an already stretched thin American working class. CNBC reports that this rise is due to a 10.9% increase in energy prices, showing how higher energy and gas prices are now trickling throughout the economy. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics further says that gasoline prices soared by 21%. Meanwhile, the University of Michigan's consumer sentiment preliminary readings fell 11%, down to 47%. Now, if that number holds, sports fans, it would be the lowest reading in U of M's consumer sentiments history. Is this the greatest part of American history? Is this the golden age of American history that Donald Trump is always talking about? Thank you, dear leader. And in my Monday Musing this week, I shared the details by a new Centers for Disease Control report showing how birth rates continue to drop in the United States. Now, good news is that we've got fewer teenage pregnancies, which is part of what sex education in schools is all about. But the reasons why adults are choosing to wait on having kids, or perhaps just one kid, shouldn't be that difficult really to understand. The American working class can't afford to have kids. I mean, a Fox News article of all places says that LendingTree reports the cost of raising a child has risen to over $303,000, topping $300,000 for the first time since 2023. By the way, wages continue to remain stagnant, not keeping up with inflation. Compound that with the fact that we are gutting food stamp programs, Medicaid, refusing to provide free child care in this country, rising healthcare costs, skyrocketing energy costs, while states like Michigan bend over backwards providing lavish tax cuts for billionaire tech bros to build their data centers here, and rising gasoline costs while doing very little to combat climate change with clean energy initiatives, well, then perhaps it makes perfect sense why working class Americans cannot afford to have kids. I mean, we've got Trump and the right-wing Israeli government's war in Iran costing us around $40 to $50 billion so far. We can't afford to do anything tangible to ensure that the working class gets some relief. We've got a war to fight. So what will the MAGA Republicans who control Congress do to combat this massive rise of wealth inequality, this rising inflation, spiking energy costs? What will they do to help the working class with real long-term solutions? Oh yes, they'll pass a resolution celebrating Dear Leader's tax cuts, because filleting a Dear Leader is all MAGA Republicans in Congress are supposed to do. I mean, that's their main job. It's number one on their criteria sheet. Well, that and protecting the pedophile billionaire Epstein class. I mean, I guess it's all the same. A class, of course, that Dear Leader is a part of. But they'll celebrate how they passed no taxes on tips, which, okay, fine. While that was one tiny sliver of goodness from that atrocious MAGA murder budget last year, it covers up the reality and the harm of the Trump regime's tax cuts. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy shows that working class Americans are paying an average of $900 more in taxes in 2026. At the same time, the wealthiest 1% will receive at least $1 trillion in tax cuts over the next decade. I mean, what's the point of celebrating taxes on tips in Michigan while gas and energy prices are higher? And thanks to the Trump regime's insane tariffs, we're paying higher taxes than ever before. And we are learning each and every day how the MAGA murder budget, also known, I guess you could call it the Big Beautiful Bill, is hurting average Americans, hurting average working class Americans more than it's harming the wealthiest. In fact, it's not even harming the wealthiest whatsoever. It's giving them more money. And by the way, MAGA Republicans gashed corporate tax rates last year, which I was told would lead to lower prices for everyone. And hey, in Michigan, how many out there are out there in the streets and saying, yes, DTE and Consumers Energy, they need more tax cuts. Betsy DeVos, she needs more tax cuts. Hey, how's that working out for everyone? All right, have your prices decreased at all? Something just tells me we won't be seeing MAGA Republicans celebrating that part of the bill. Our good friend Jeffrey Smith from GRID, that's Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, shared some numbers from the National Priorities Project, which shows how instead of handing the Trump regime and defense contractors $200 billion to continue their war on Iran, we could, perhaps, spend that money on expanding Medicaid coverage to some 10 million Americans. We could do that. And to break it down in Michigan terms, working class Michiganders are paying just over $4.5 billion if that $200 billion goes through. Now, of course, if we chose to spend that money in different ways, it could go on to help fund food stamp benefits for some 2 million Michiganders, and 813,000 Michiganders could receive Medicaid. According to a State Line story, at least 2.5 million low-income people, or 6% of those enrolled, have lost SNAP benefits since the MAGA murder budget was signed into law by dear leader Trump last year, and that's according to a study by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And as already talked about here, over 170,000 Michiganders are losing their Medicaid this year thanks to the MAGA murder budget. That is why I've always called it the MAGA murder budget. That bill, the so-called big, beautiful bill, will end up hurting and, yes, killing people. I mean, hell, we could invest in affordable housing and expand dental and vision care if we chose to spend money on the working class here rather than for some $1.5 trillion defense budget that dear leader Trump is proposing, which is nothing but a government handout to defense contractors and to the Epstein class. I mean, you have to wonder, what exactly will MAGA Michigan Republicans in Congress celebrate when they pass that resolution here this week? I mean, what the hell will Lisa McClain or Bill Huizenga or John James, who's supposedly running for governor, or Tom Barrett really celebrate? I mean, they will celebrate behind closed doors because they will have done the Epstein donor class's work. Tom Barrett, by the way, Tom Barrett is really a piece of work. He represents the 7th Congressional District, which is Michigan Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin's old seat. Now, Barrett's been nothing but a rubber stamp for his dear leader Trump, and he simply doesn't do much of anything real substantial for his working class constituents. He really doesn't. He shows up here, shows up there, makes a few votes. I guess unlike John James, he does show up to vote. I mean, he doesn't really seem that all upset with dear leader's war on Iran as he collects PAC money from pro-right-wing Israeli groups and donors. I haven't heard him say, you know what, Mr. President, I'm against this war. I think we should be more America first. No, Tom Barrett hasn't said a damn thing. Tom Barrett hasn't really seemed all that upset that his dear leader's name appears in the Epstein files over 1,000 times. He doesn't seem fazed by how dear leader's war on Iran is costing voters at the pump, while dear leader gutted clean energy initiatives here in Michigan. I mean, initiatives that would have helped Michigan's environment and economy, especially now. Moving to the Democratic primary fight for Tom Barrett's 7th Congressional District seat, between progressive political activist and community fighter and working class representative William Lawrence, former ambassador to Ukraine Bridget Brink, and former Navy SEAL Matt Masdam. Now, just like we're seeing in that Michigan Democratic primary race for the U.S. Senate, this primary race in the 7th District, which comprises of parts of Ingham, Clinton, and Shiawassee and Livingston counties, is one where we've got someone running as the establishment centrist candidate. That's Bridget Brink. We've got the progressive working class candidate like William Lawrence. And then there's Matt Masdam, who's trying to find his way into the mix. Again, it just seems so much like the Senate race. Now, Bridget Brink is clearly the establishment Michigan Democratic Party leadership's choice. And here's her resume. She was nominated by dear leader Trump to be ambassador to Slovakia, and then she was nominated by President Biden to serve as ambassador in Ukraine. And she was there when Russia began its invasion of Ukraine, its illegal invasion of Ukraine. And Brink would later make some big news when she resigned her ambassadorship after it was clear to her that the Trump regime's plan to end the Russian-Ukraine war was to pressure Ukraine rather than pressure their dear Vladimir Putin. And that was the correct move, and she's been critical of the Trump regime's reluctance when it comes to Russia. So she decided to run for Congress in the 7th District, where she hasn't exactly spent a whole lot of time, let's be honest, and where it's obvious that she's been told to run as a mushy, milquetoast, pro-national security, MAGA-lightish Democrat. I mean, it seems like that she's trying to run and sound like Alyssa Slotkin. And it seems like her number one goal is to stop Trump. And so, yeah, that's fine. But how exactly? I mean, is Bridget Brink calling for ICE to be abolished? Is Bridget Brink calling for the Iran war to be ended immediately and for impeachment hearings to begin immediately? Is Bridget Brink calling for an end to arms for Israel, both offensive and defensive arms? I haven't really heard too much there. You would hope that as a Democrat, she would oppose sending some arms to Israel's right-wing genocidal government. Does Bridget Brink understand how our neoliberal foreign policy that gave us the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and now Iran War have all failed? And on her domestic priorities, Bridget Brink says that she wants to reinstate the Obamacare tax credits that ended last year when the Trump regime and MAGA Republicans like Tom Barrett refused to extend them. And she also says that she wants to make things affordable for working class Americans. Okay, but how does that change the trajectory of the working class that's been left behind, as I've been talking about here for the last 10 minutes or so? My good friend, Dr. Josh Cowan, who's an MSU education professor and who wrote the awesome and insightful book on the billionaire DeVos family and other billionaire Epstein-class families' plans to use culture wars as a way to pass school vouchers in his book called The Privateers. Well, he ran for the 7th congressional seat before bowing out earlier this year. And after he bowed out, Josh Cowan endorsed Bridget Brink. And I know I'm paraphrasing here, but Josh argues that it's a district which has voted Republican throughout his life, except for when Alyssa Slotkin was running for that seat. And he said that Bridget Brink will bring the kind of bipartisanship that we need to solve problems. Well, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, okay? But how can you find bipartisanship with the party that supports fascism? How can you find bipartisanship with a party that wants to abolish public education? And how will moderation defeat MAGA republicanism? It hasn't happened yet. In fact, moderation keeps losing, and the Overton window keeps getting pushed further and further to the right. How will helping restore some Obamacare cuts help restore the working class? How will refusing to hold Israel to account be a true America First agenda? And I'll tell you what, Bridget Brink did receive the endorsement from the former Michigan Democratic House Chair, Joe Tate. Yeah, that Joe Tate, who celebrated massive handouts for corporate welfare in Lansing. And yeah, that Joe Tate, who blocked polluter pay from ever becoming law in Michigan. The same Joe Tate, whose former chief of staff received a nice, cushy spot on the Michigan Public Service Commission when Governor Gretchen Whitmer removed a climate change advocate and put Tate's former chief of staff in that spot. You see, she was viewed more of a industry pal, especially more than that climate change advocate. And like sands through the hourglass, the entire commission makes it its daily routine to okay rate hikes for DTE and Consumers Energy, while also greenlighting data centers. Seems to me Bridget Brink should have looked at Joe Tate and said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But no, she celebrated it. She welcomed Joe Tate's endorsement. Now, there is one candidate who understands the people and understands his community and understands his district. And by the way, why is it? Those who actually get their hands dirty in their community and do things and advocate on behalf of their community, why is it that they tend to be the more progressive ones who are trying to improve the lives and conditions of their community? Why is that? Like progressive Kyle Blomquist, who I interviewed a few weeks ago in his race for the Northern Michigan congressional seat, or next week's guest, Aisha Faruqi, who's running for the 11th congressional district. William Lawrence has walked the walk and is talking the talk in his run to become the Democratic nominee for the 7th congressional district. William Lawrence is my guest this week, and I think you'll like what he has to say, and more importantly, what he stands for. You're listening to LOL.
Helping push a strong progressive message from Kalkaska to Kalamazoo, from Monroe to Marquette, from Detroit to DeWitt, from Trenton to Traverse City. Okay, Pat, I think they get the idea. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Show archives are available wherever you're listening to the show. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. You can check out a complete archive of the show and other stellar content Pat doesn't share on the show. Visit patreon.com/Left of Lansing. Become a member for free. And check out Left of Lansing on YouTube as well. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
All right, I'm happy to welcome back progressive political activist, community fighter, and working class representative William Lawrence back to the show. William announced his candidacy for the 7th Congressional District last year, and that district encompasses Lansing and also includes the counties of Ingham, Clinton, Shiawassee, Livingston, as well as parts of Genesee, Oakland, and Eaton counties. So kind of a big district there. And it's a seat that used to be held by Michigan Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, but is now being held by MAGA Republican Congressman Tom Barrett. William Lawrence, thanks so much for coming back to talk with us here on Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Pat. Thanks for having me.
I just want to ask you first off, how's the campaign going? And has anything really surprised you since you threw your hat in the ring to run for Michigan's 7th Congressional District?
Well, the campaign's going great. I'm working hard to cover the whole district from Grand Ledge to South Lyon and Maple River down to Leslie and everywhere between, including a lot of time here in the Lansing area. And we have some polling out recently that shows that it's a tight three-way race among the three primary candidates, but two of those three polls have me in the lead, so I'm feeling great about that. And we've just crossed 800 volunteers signed up helping with the campaign, so there's a lot of enthusiasm, and we're going to keep getting people activated and engaged as the weather warms up. And what's been surprising to me, people are ready for change. I knew that. I thought that might be the case. But the extent to which people who have been part of perhaps the more moderate faction of the Democratic Party over the years are now recognizing the fact that we need bold leadership and a strong and assertive program of change, because the just play it safe, take it slow approach has only brought us a second Trump administration, which has been utterly disastrous. And people are realizing that we need the kind of leadership that, Bernie Sanders and AOC have been offering on the national level.
You recently attended the No Kings rally in Lansing that took place back at the end of March. From the people that you talked to at that event, did it seem to you that they wanted slow, play it safe kind of change?
No, absolutely not. I mean, my speech really focused on accountability and the rule of law for the most powerful people in the country. The Epstein files have revealed what we already suspected, which is that people at the top of business and government on both sides of the political aisle, unfortunately, have been implicated in this sex trafficking and tax evasion scheme among some of the richest people in the world. And both parties, including the Democrats under Biden, have let this continue, let folks get away with it. And that's why I say, if we're going to live in a country of laws, then we need to enforce the law for the most powerful people in the country. And that means there have to be consequences and accountability, and people have to go to prison. And people were cheering for that because they're sick of seeing the most powerful people get away with everything while working class people get the squeeze year after year.
No, I agree with you, Will. I think that the Epstein files were blocked primarily to stop the public from ever learning exactly how this elite cabal of corporate giants, of the CEOs, of these billionaires, of this political elite that is pervasive on both sides of the aisle, as you said, it allowed the working class here in this country to see how this group views itself as this untouchable base, this untouchable class that never has to worry about any repercussions and that will never be held accountable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, what we have to find out, the jury is out on whether they are untouchable. So far, nobody has been held accountable. And that's why we need to have strong leadership that insists that they must be.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, but I know that you were involved in that debate over this deep green data center that was proposed in Lansing, and the project's developer, of course, withdrew its proposal. I think just before the Lansing City Council was supposed to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
That data center, which from my reading wasn't one of those, hyperscale AI data centers that are being proposed in other places or that are being built, let's say, in Saline. But I know that you opposed the center, which you said that while it was one of the least objectionable of the data center proposals in Michigan. You called it a devil's bargain. Can you explain what the fight over that data center was really about and why, Will, you viewed it as a quote unquote devil's bargain?
Sure. My biggest concern was that the story from the Lansing Board of Water and Light about how the energy demand for the center would be served kept changing. When we first heard about this proposal in November, BWL said that the entire demand for the power usage would be served by BWL's existing infrastructure. And that was the story for about 2 months. Then the story changed and they said, actually, there's going to be a methane gas fuel cell power generation plant on the site that is going to generate 2/3 of the power need for the data center. And then only weeks before the proposal was to be voted on, they said, and furthermore, that methane gas fuel cell is going to be owned by a third-party corporation and managed by them, not by the BWL or by the Deep Green Company. And furthermore, we've entered into a non-disclosure agreement with that company. And so we can't tell you any of the details about how it's going to work. And coming on the heels of back-to-back consumer rate hikes by BWL, there's a real lack of trust that when they say that this isn't going to result in any increased costs for your average residential consumer, people don't believe that. People don't believe it. They don't believe it when it's coming from, DTE or consumers either at these other data centers around the state. And so while, as I've said, the Deep Green project was clearly smaller in scale and in many ways less objectionable than many of the other data centers around the state, the power usage is still a major concern in my book, both because of the pollution that creates, but also because of the fact that our energy bills are too damn high. And it's clear that the data center companies and the utilities both share an interest in just continuing to build. And that's not necessarily in the interest of ratepayers or the planet.
So once again, then, it sounds like there was just a lack of transparency that's similar to what we're seeing in other communities that are dealing with data center proposals.
Yeah, there is a lack of transparency. And I do think that there were good efforts made by Deep Green to explain their proposal. I will give them credit for coming and doing public events to answer questions, which is more than can be said for many of the other operators around the state. That's why I don't want to lump them all in the same bucket. That being said, there's just not a lot of public trust out there right now that the leadership at the city of Lansing or the BWL or at the top of, major multinational corporations are going to do the right thing for the working class. And so that means we need that much more accountable and transparent and visionary leadership at every level, including the municipal, the state, and the federal level, in order to show a vision of what actual common good can look like. Because people don't believe that development is going to be in their interest, because over the last 50 years, all of the profits from increased productivity and development have gone to the 1%, while the working class has stagnated. So that's why it's difficult to build things. It's difficult to get approval for things because people are skeptical that it's going to come out in the end in a way that benefits them. And they're right to doubt. They're right to doubt. So I understand the frustration from people who say, like, we have to build things. We have to be able to build housing. We have to be able to build energy infrastructure. This data center was small. We should have been able to build it. And I really am sympathetic to that perspective. When it comes to energy and when it comes to housing, I certainly want to see a lot more renewable energy and affordable housing built. And that's going to run into some of the same challenges because we do know that some people just are skeptical of change and they don't want to see anything built in their neighborhood. But the fact of the matter is that is also for a reason. And it's because there is no social compact that says that the benefits of growth will be shared by all. If we could restore that social and economic compact, which existed for much of the 20th century in this country, we would find that people would have a much larger appetite for development of all kinds.
All right, then, Will, do you believe that there are some leaders within the party, Democratic leaders, who just are not getting it? And I'm actually talking about Michigan Democratic Party leaders. Do you think that they are misreading how much the public is really against all of these big tech bro billionaire data centers?
Yes. Instead, they like to lecture to us. They lecture to us and they say, don't you know that this is going to be a great thing? And people just don't believe it. People do not believe it. Don't you know that this is going to be a great thing? No, we don't know. because we haven't seen it in the past and we're not seeing it now. So there have to be a much stronger level of like binding commitments to community benefits and benefits for the working class in order for people to trust that this stuff is actually going to work out in their favor. And I think the Democrats are in major risk right now of ending up on the wrong side of this issue at the state level. There's already the matter that these tax breaks for data centers were passed under the Democratic House and Senate a couple of years ago. But now we're finding that the governor remains a very strong proponent of these kinds of plans. Our gubernatorial nominee, Jocelyn Benson, soon to be the nominee, is definitely conflicted on these issues. And I'm very concerned, actually, that the Republicans are going to end up on the side of the people on this data center issue, and the Democrats are going to end up a little bit split or wavering or confused on it.
Yeah, that's my fear too, as well, Will.
There's one more thing on that, Pat.
Go ahead.
I saw a poll that said that, the poll was, do you trust big tech? And who are the ones who are driving all these data centers, of course. And the response was Democrats, only 20% out of 100 trusted big tech. Republicans, 20% out of Republican trusted big tech. That's an amazing statistic because you do not see numbers like that in today's politics, where almost every issue ends up being polarized along partisan lines. So that data really reflected what we're all seeing on the ground, which is there is a genuinely cross-partisan rebellion against big tech data centers and AI that is prompted from the bottom up and is truly a bipartisan phenomenon.
You're right. We don't see a whole lot of issues right now in our political climate in which you see Democrats, Republicans, left and right kind of agree on a certain issue. And you are seeing that with data centers. You're right. I was going to ask you, I know that you were involved in terms of this data center fight in Lansing. Were any of your fellow Democratic Party opponents, former ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, or retired Navy SEAL Matt Masdom, were any of them at these various city council meetings or any of these community forums about this data center? I was just wondering.
No, I didn't see them here in Lansing, nor have I seen them in Howell Township or in Mason or in Lyon Township, which are three other places in the 7th District where there have been proposed hyperscale data centers. And I haven't heard a peep from them or from Tom Barrett about any of them.
Well, I'll have to tell you, that doesn't surprise me one bit about Tom Barrett not caring or not being there. But yeah, that's too bad that Bridget Brink nor Matt Masdom wanted to attend any of those significant meetings to a significant issue in a district that they claim they want to represent. And Will, maybe that will lead to my next line of questioning, because the aforementioned former Ukraine ambassador Bridget Brink said the following in a social media post to one of her followers a couple of weeks ago. And Bridget Brink said, "Do you want a government that just works without fanfare and with efficiency and effectiveness?" Look, I get the gist of what Bridget Brink is saying, especially as we are living in these times of the Trump regime and the massive corruption that regime brings to our government. But here's the problem. And it again, I think, reveals a glaring blind spot that Democratic Party leaders still are not getting. People, they don't just want a government that will work with some efficiency. They want a government that actually stands up for them. I mean, we tried this whole, Democrats will keep things as they are and stand up for institutions and stand up for the status quo. But the problem is, the failure of the status quo is what brought us to this point of Trump authoritarianism. So what would you say in response to Bridget Brink's statement that I just shared with you?
It's like you're in the skyscraper that is on fire. The skyscraper is on fire and it's burning through all the different levels of the building. And you're standing there on the 25th floor and you're saying, wouldn't it be great if this place just worked? Wouldn't it be great if it just worked? And I'm here to make it work. I said, no. No, we need to call the fire department. We need to get the heck out of this building and take some drastic action. We're in the utter freefall of American power and standing on the world stage. We are standing in the rubble of the former social and political compact that existed in this country, which was, again, the New Deal that said that people can work to get rich in this country, but only as long as the working class is going to also be respected and empowered, and nobody's going to be dying on the street for lack of the basics. That's what the New Deal and then Lyndon Johnson's Great Society were all about, and that's distant memory at this point. We have no stability or security in this country because the richest people, Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of them, have decided that we are just their playthings to manipulate and steal our attention through our phones and then use this whole country as a launch pad so that they can go to the moon or Mars or wherever. They do not care about us. They do not care about us. And now those are the people who have bought our elections and are deeply powerful in the Trump regime. And that's the situation we've got to deal with. How do we actually disempower these very, very powerful people who've shown that they have no regard for American values or common decency or human rights? They have no care about us. So we're in a fight. And we've got to fight against the richest and most powerful people in this country who have shown that they do not care about us. That's what we've got to deal with before we can have any hope of just a stable and secure order that just works quietly without people having to notice it. It's going to take at least a decade before we can have any confidence that we're back to quote unquote normal, because even if the next election after that goes well, then we've got to fight to enact the social and political reforms that will prevent someone like Trump from being able to take office again and prevent somebody like Elon Musk from having his hands on the levers of state ever again, and on and on.
Hey, and don't forget about the billionaires in our own backyard here in Michigan, like Betsy DeVos and the DeVos family, for instance,
Certainly. Yeah. For the last however long, when things were happening, I mean, they've been working in the background to bring us to this point long before most people started to notice. And so now the last thing we can do is make false promises to people that says, hey, if you just vote for me, everything is going to work out and it's going to go back to normal. That's a very dangerous message because it's a lie about what time it is in the history of this country. The fact of the matter is that we're in a big fight and we've got to get organized to win that fight as regular working class people all over this district and all over the country.
Right. I'm hearing some say, just let's get back to normal. But what will normal look like? Because it appears to me that in several statements that she's made, including I read this Lansing State Journal op-ed that she wrote a few months ago. Bridget Brink is kind of advocating, I think, like the status quo, even on issues like healthcare. Now, I'm glad that Bridget Brink was able to get her breast cancer detected early and that she beat it. That's great. And I'm more than glad that she, I think, genuinely cares about early breast cancer detection. I have a close member of my family who had breast cancer almost 10 years ago, and it was detected in time and defeated. But like Bridget, they also had, good health care coverage. But it shouldn't come down to your position in society or your job to ensure that you get decent health care coverage. And I read that Bridget Brink's solutions are to reinstate Obamacare tax credits that MAGA Republicans like Congressman Tom Barrett, of course, opposed to re-up. But those tax credits were needed because healthcare costs continue to climb out of control, Will. And it's I think a solution like that is just putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and it's fighting the same failed and out-of-control business model, which just keeps insurance companies running our lives. And it seems to me, William, that you are on the side of the majority of Americans who say that they want Medicare for all. However, does it frustrate you to keep hearing from people, to keep hearing from even your Democratic Party opponents for this House seat that we've just got to do the bare minimum to keep Americans healthy in what I hear is still the richest country in the world? Does that frustrate you?
I'm past being frustrated. I'm glad that Bridget Brink wants to see more people get health care, and I'm glad that she was able to get the health care that she needed. Absolutely. What I'm clear about is that the only way we'll actually get good health care for everybody is by having a single payer system, which covers us all for life. And that's really not too much to ask. Countries all over the world are doing this and delivering equal or higher quality care as we receive at a lower price. And it also relieves us of the anxiety of wondering where your healthcare coverage or your kids' coverage is going to come from in the future. It takes all of the guesswork out of how do I get a job that has good healthcare, or when can I leave my job because I have the healthcare now, but I don't really like the job. All of that goes away because you know that you are covered for life, full stop. That's the country I want to live in, and it's the country that we can win, but only if we're willing to stand up to the health insurance executives who are currently getting rich off of all of our backs.
I'm going to ask you the same question I ran by a fellow progressive of yours in Michigan, Kyle Blomquist. He's running for the 1st Congressional District up in northern Michigan. And I asked him this question. What is your response to those who say, look, I understand the healthcare system is broken. It's disastrous. But, at the same time, they'll tell you, I don't know if I'm so sure about having the government be in control of our healthcare. I'm not so sure where I stand completely on Medicare for all. from what they may have heard from some friends and family, will that lead to communism? So what's your response when you hear concerns like that, which I'm sure you do on the trail?
I've heard from a lot of folks on the trail who have friends or family over the river in Canada. And what they say is that the people in Canada, they would never, ever, ever trade their system for ours. Because the reality is that when they need something, they get it. They get it. And they don't have to worry about who's going to pay for it. They don't have to worry about where their coverage is going to come from or where their kids' coverage is going to come from. They're covered for life. And that's what we need too.
That's a good answer. That's a great answer, actually. Just look across the river and you'll see that a lot of Canadians, while they may have issues with their government, of course, who doesn't? The majority still like their healthcare system over there. So, William, you were the first candidate in this race to release a statement regarding Trump and Israel's war in Iran. And, you just immediately voiced your opposition to that war. Why did you feel like it was important to let voters know of your position on this war pretty quickly?
Well, because we've seen what's happened in the 45 days since that war started. It's been an utter disaster for the American people who are paying higher gas prices, for American global standing, for the people of Iran, not to mention Lebanon and across the region who are dealing with immense chaos as a result of the missiles flying in every direction. Saying no to war has been one of the core convictions animating my run from the beginning. Last summer, Pat, I was thinking about whether I should run, and it's a big commitment, obviously, and takes a lot of time, a lot of personal sacrifice for me and my family. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to do it or not. And I was at a wedding up north for a couple of good friends of mine. And I was under instructions from the groom not to inform him if we bombed Iran, because this was when the original strikes on the nuclear sites last summer were being rumored. He was trying to enjoy his wedding weekend. And, this was a very reasonable request. He wanted to enjoy his wedding weekend. Then the wedding happened. We're at the after party. I'm on the dance floor at like 10 p.m. And I take my phone out of my pocket, which is always a mistake. And I open it up and it had happened. We had bombed the Fordo nuclear site, and everyone was speculating about whether we were going to, enter World War III or Lord knows what. And I look around and I was surrounded by all these dancing millennials, with smooth brows because they hadn't heard the news yet. And I thought, my Lord, this is some sort of hell that we're living in. There's a lot of versions of hell, but this is one of them. And I thought about, back to the beginning of the war on terror and then the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. 25 years has been over half of my life since then. And this is where we are, beginning another chapter of the forever war in the Middle East and West Asia. This cannot be the life that we ought to be living. I thought to myself, I think I am going to run for Congress because somebody has to say that this is insanity. The United States cannot just assume that it can impose its will on any government or any people around the world just because we want to. We've got to recognize that it's a big planet, that there are a lot of powerful governments on the planet. It's not 1950 anymore. In 1950, we could dictate the terms. In 2026, we can't dictate the terms. And if we attempt to do so, it's going to result in the death of a lot of people, and it won't do anything to stop the decline of the United States. Actually, if we want to stop the decline of the United States on a world scale, we need to learn how to engage in diplomacy and collaboration to solve global problems, like the global economic recession, which is now happening because of the stupid war that we started in Iran, or like climate change, which is still happening, is still causing immense negative economic impacts for farmers here in Michigan, and which is causing devastating human rights impacts around the world. And we can only stop with global collaboration with countries all over the world, including China, which is, the country that supposedly, we have to be able to beat in the next big war after this stupid war that we're currently in the process of losing in Iran. So it was important for me to speak out early and often against this war in Iran, because war is not the answer to the problems of our time. Restraint, collaboration, and diplomacy have to be the way forward, because otherwise we will have World War III. Our war planners in the Republican and the Democratic Party fully expect that we will enter World War III within the next several years, and they're planning for it. I think nothing could be more disastrous, and I'm here to help stop it.
Finally, I remember recently, and I talked about it here on my show, it was about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, how Congressman Tom Barrett wanted to investigate you and I believe others from East Lansing High School who were participating in an anti-ICE protest a few months ago. Were you surprised at all that Tom Barrett and his team would spend their, I would say, valuable time investigating you, or especially public school and its students over the First Amendment rights?
Yeah, it was pretty funny. So what happened is that the students at East Lansing walked out along with other students across the whole region in protest of ICE after the killings in Minneapolis. And I went to the East Lansing Public Library where they had gathered, and I said, keep it up. You're doing a great job. That's about all I had to say. And then Tom Barrett's team said, we're filing a FOIA request against East Lansing Public Schools, seeking correspondence between candidate William Lawrence, the students in this political action club, and their club advisors. And there was nothing to find. There was nothing to find because I didn't put them up to this protest. They figured it all out on their own. It just shows that, first of all, he's very scared that he's going to lose this election because he knows that he's unpopular and his record is unpopular. So he's looking to, I guess, paint me as some corrupter of the youth, which is ridiculous. But it just goes to show you that he's got a thin skin. He can't answer for his record. I think the only thing thinner than his skin is his record of accomplishment in office. And that's why he's going to lose this November.
And it just also was another example of him using the Trump playbook of intimidation, too. That's how I was looking at it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, Will, thank you so much for taking some of your valuable time here to talk with us here on Left of Lansing. If people would like to learn more about your campaign and would like to volunteer and help out in any way, how can they do so?
Yes, thank you, Pat. Go to wewill2026.com. You can sign up to volunteer and donate and get updates there. You can also drop into our campaign office where I am at this very moment. The office is at 3024 East Michigan Avenue, right off of 127 near Frandor, directly across from Staples. 3024 East Michigan Avenue. And we're open from 1 to 9 p.m. every weekday and 1 to 5 on weekends. And it's always a great time here in the campaign office. You can come in and pick up a packet to knock doors or do a shift in the office, do some data entry, and meet a lot of other cool people who are working to make a difference for good.
All right. Progressive Democratic candidate for Michigan's 7th Congressional District, William Lawrence. William, thanks again for your time. And I would love to have you on one more time, maybe sometime during the summer before the August primary, if that's okay.
That sounds great. And yeah, I'll see you again. And then for folks who are going to get your mail ballot, remember your mail ballots will be coming out in late June. And remember just to go ahead and vote for William Lawrence and send that thing right back in. If you don't vote by mail, you can vote in person on August 4th.
Bringing progressivism with passion each and every week. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd also like to thank Audio Boom for publishing the show and helping us spread our populist, progressive, and patriotic message. Speaking of which, let's get back to the show with Pat.
Special thanks to William Lawrence for being on the show here this week. William's going up against the big money and influence of the establishment Democratic Party here in Michigan, and he's going to need all the help that you can give him. I'll link to William's campaign site so you can help out, and I will also link to his socials wherever you are listening. I'd like to note that William Lawrence's establishment primary opponent for that 7th Congressional District, Bridget Brink, has accepted cash from pro-Israel groups and supporters, but what made my head shake during our talk just a few moments ago was how neither she nor the other candidate, Matt Masdam, couldn't be bothered to attend any of the data center fights happening in the 7th District. It's a rather big issue in Michigan and across the country, and Bridget Brink was nowhere to be found. And if you'd like to know how much stock the establishment Democratic Party in Michigan is putting behind Bridget Brink, I told you how former Speaker Joe Tate is backing her. Unfortunately for her, but Democratic Senate Majority Floor Leader Sam Singh announced his support for Bridget Brink this week, a move her supporters claim is huge. Now, I get that Senator Singh has respect and, has done some nice work. He's also not running for re-election this year. But I'd like to remind you of last year, when a slew of state House and state Senate Democrats joined MAGA Republicans in cutting a scheduled minimum wage hike and paid sick leave law in half before it went into effect. Now, while I'm not supporting her candidacy, State Senator and Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Mallory McMorrow was one of the few Democrats who voted against that wretched bill, and that was good on her. But State Senator Sam Singh spearheaded that effort to essentially cut the expected and scheduled benefits of the working class in order to appease the restaurant industry lobby. Gross. Like I said earlier today, it's all about priorities. It's always about priorities, right? Let's move on to the LOL web poll for the week. Last week, I asked you if you would support a candidate who received AIPAC money, and 75% of you voted no. Well, that's the vote I hoped to get. Actually, I was hoping for 100%. Anyway, this week's LOL poll, which you can vote on my Twitter page, YouTube page, or the Patreon page, is the following. How important is it in 2026 that Democratic candidates for any office back Medicare for all? Your answers will be very, somewhat, or not at all. Time now for the Left of Lansing last call. When it comes to the latest on the Michigan Democratic Senate primary front, Progressive Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and Miss AIPAC, Haley Stevens, have all submitted their signatures to qualify for the August primary. They all did it here within the week. And we've got a new poll, new data from, what is this called? It's called Data for Progress poll that was conducted by Zetio and Dropsite News. Dropsite News, by the way, my favorite news site for international news and especially for coverage with the Iran war. This Data for Progress poll shows that the race in this Democratic primary is essentially a three-way tie with Haley Stevens at 23% and both Dr. Abdul and McMorrow at 22%. 33% of voters still remain undecided at this point. But here's some interesting numbers from this Data for Progress poll. And I'm just going to read it to you. The question is, a candidate that receives political donations from AIPAC. According to the respondents in this poll, 10% said that they would be more likely to support that candidate. Okay. 64% said that they would be less likely to support a candidate in this Michigan Democratic Senate primary race if they got money from AIPAC. 64% said that they would be less likely to support that candidate if they got money from AIPAC. Now, here's the next question. If a candidate is not willing to stand up to AIPAC, I am less likely to trust them to stand up for Michiganders on other issues. Let me repeat, 62% said that they would be less likely to trust the candidate who is not willing to stand up to AIPAC. 62%. 13% said they disagreed, 25% don't know. So if that is true, if those numbers are true, then how the hell is Haley Stevens still in this race? She's got videos of herself, everyone, thanking and praising AIPAC for its help in her previous campaigns, including her primary a few years ago where AIPAC helped her defeat a fellow Democratic congressman named Andy Levin. Now, Andy Levin is Jewish. You see, he didn't follow the AIPAC bag of lies, and so they threw all of their money at Haley Stevens. So that way they could go after him big time, and they helped Haley Stevens essentially get through. Also, if it were a two-person race between McMorrow and Haley Stevens, McMorrow wins, according to this poll. But if El-Sayed faces Stevens, Stevens would apparently win at this point, which means that more of El-Sayed's voters would trend towards McMorrow than Stevens. But if these numbers are correct, more of McMorrow's voters would trend towards Stevens if Haley Stevens only had to face Dr. Abdul. What? Somebody please square that circle for me because it makes zero freaking sense. McMorrow's not taking corporate PAC money in her campaign this time, and she's at least begrudgingly described Israel's actions in Gaza to be a genocide. That's the complete opposite of Haley Stevens, who was also handpicked by Chuck Schumer as his favorite candidate. Or, well, I guess now, according to some reports, Chuck Schumer now likes McMorrow. So, I guess if you've got Chuck Schumer on your side, well, look out. Who are these McMorrow voters? And why would they back Miss AIPAC Stevens over Dr. Abdul, who AIPAC despises, who has never accepted corporate PAC money, and who is a real advocate for Medicare for all? I mean, why would Mallory McMorrow voters, supposedly, according to this poll, vote for Stevens over Dr. Abdul? What's going on there? I mean, really, that's a question to all of you. What is going on there? Maybe you can answer it.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Left of Lansing. You can always email yours truly at leftoflansing@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow Left of Lansing on Patreon. Special thanks to Progressive Democratic candidate William Lawrence, who's running for the 7th Congressional District. And next week, we'll talk with Progressive Democratic candidate Aisha Faruqi, who's running for Michigan's 11th Congressional District. I've been looking forward to having Miss Faruqi on the show here for quite some time now, so I'm looking forward to it. Everyone, we're not in a fight to make things slightly better because, you know what, that hasn't worked out too well for the working class. And incrementalism and moderation certainly didn't save us from the brink of fascism. We need to take a sledgehammer to the Epstein-class power structure, and we need to start making our government work on behalf of us, the working class. And we do that by taking the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan!
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.